18. One last try. July 2nd, 2018. On the 10th day the wild boars have been missing, Rick and John's goal is to push as far past Samyak as they can. They get ready for the dive ahead, checking their gear and emergency equipment before setting out. The pair carries with them something that is just as important as their diving gear, a mental discipline they have cultivated through decades of cave dives. That mental strength under pressure is absolutely critical for the long, deep dives that Rick and John tackle. When you are hundreds of yards into a sump, you are so isolated from the basic needs of survival that you may as well be on the surface of the moon. It's no wonder then that sump divers seem to possess the same qualities as astronauts: the ability to prepare thoroughly, solve problems quickly, and keep cool in an emergency. Rick Stanton has a pre-dive ritual that he conducts before he enters the water. It starts with visualizing the upcoming dive, imagining any problems that might arise, and walking through possible solutions. During his pre-dive ritual, Rick might rehearse how to handle situations like a flooded rebreather or a guideline tangled around his foot. And if problems like these do arise, his mental rehearsals will allow him to stay loose and calm. And when diving a tricky cave like Tamluang, problems will almost certainly arise. The ability to steadily work through them without panicking is the number one skill a sump diver must have. As Rick and John slip into the water, their minds are trained on the dive. They aren't thinking back to what they ate for breakfast or what will happen if they don't reach their target destination. They focus on the here and now. That laser focus on the present isn't very different from what Buddhist monks practice during their meditations. In fact, some cave divers talk about diving as a type of meditation because it's impossible to let your mind wander if you want to stay alive. Rebreathe, reuse, recycle. There are two types of breathing equipment available to the divers at Tamluang: open circuit equipment and rebreathers. Each type has its advantages and drawbacks. Our bodies need oxygen to survive, but our lungs can use only a tiny percentage of the oxygen in each breath. Every time you breathe, your body absorbs about 5% of the oxygen from each inhale. The other 95% gets exhaled along with carbon dioxide. With open circuit equipment, the exhaled oxygen disappears in streams of bubbles that float to the surface. A rebreather cuts down on all that waste by recycling the unused oxygen in each breath. The rebreather contains a substance that absorbs the carbon dioxide the diver exhales, so they don't breathe it back in. Inhaling too much carbon dioxide can make you black out. Not a good thing when you're swimming through a flooded cave. The oxygen that the diver doesn't use is passed back through the system to be inhaled on the next breath. A computer monitors the mix of gases in the system and displays the information for the diver. Rebreathers allow divers to stay underwater far longer and dive much deeper than they can with open circuit equipment. The moist recycled air from rebreathers also helps keep the diver warmer and more hydrated. But rebreathers have their disadvantages. They are much more complex, with more parts that can fail. And when they do fail, the results can be extreme, such as blackouts or seizures due to the diver getting too little or too much oxygen. Rick Stanton likes to keep things as simple as possible. The veteran caver, firefighter, and tinkerer designs and builds much of his own equipment, including a thermal vest he cobbled together out of a rubber doormat. The rebreather Rick designed is as streamlined as they come. It doesn't have backup computers for monitoring his oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. Diving without that backup option would make some divers uneasy, but Rick is so in tune with his body that he feels he can detect problems with his equipment as well as any computer. Some divers at Tamluang do use rebreathers, but even Rick's simple homemade version is more complicated and bulkier than open circuit equipment, so Rick and John both choose the open circuit option. Rick and John squeeze past Sam Yak. Here, there is no more guideline to follow, so they lay their own. They have to pause often and tie the line around boulders so that it doesn't come loose and get carried off in the current. Fighting that current, even with a pair of fins to help with the kicking, makes the going even slower. Beyond the junction, they come up in a chamber that is relatively dry. They tie off their line and climb out of the water. They believe this is the spot where Vern thinks the boys might be sheltering, but there is no sign of them. They have a few hundred yards of line left, so the two divers get back into the water. It doesn't take long for them to reach the end of their spool of guideline. They have pushed deep past Samyak and still haven't found anyone. It looks as if they will be returning to base camp without any good news once again. But when they go to tie off their line, they realize there is an airspace above them. Rick surfaces to have a look around. They are in a canal that is only partially filled with water. Rick takes off his mask and sniffs the air. He smells something awful. Rick has been preparing himself for the odor of a decomposing dead body. But while the odor he smells is something that most of us would much rather not encounter, it fills him with relief. The smell of human feces.